Today we're going to start our new unit on the Islamic world, and today we're going to begin by talking about the origins of Islam, so how it begins, along with the basic beliefs of this religion. Before we can start talking about the religion of Islam, we need to understand the geography from where this religion grew. Islam will start on the Arabian Peninsula. And during this time, it was a crossroads of trade between three continents: Africa, Europe, and Asia. Most of Arabia is made up of desert with very little arable land. Remember, arable means farmable. So we don't have very good farmland in this region, and it's inhabited by clans of nomadic herders called Bedouins. And we remember that nomads are people with no permanent home, and they're herding their animals to different sources of water. So on this map, we can see Arabia right in the center. It is a peninsula surrounded by water on three sides. Today, it's the country of Saudi Arabia. We would say that the Arabian Peninsula is in the Middle East region. There are going to be some important cities that we need to know. We're going to need to know Mecca. We're going to need to know Medina. And we're going to need to know Damascus, which is actually in Syria. And you can see that Mecca and Medina are close to the coast of the Red Sea. It's going to put them in a position where they're able to trade. And we can see the proximity to the region known as Mesopotamia, which is just to the northeast. So when we think of Arabia, we should be thinking of a desert, an arid region with little rainfall. The early Arabs were known as Bedouins, and they were divided up into tribes, which means they're extended families. Each tribe was headed by a sheikh, or an Arab chief, and they were traveling, moving their animals along, looking for a source of water. Now, over time, they would travel in caravans, and that's a group of traders moving together in order to protect themselves from potential enemies, and they would trade goods from across the three continents. Now, for these people, warfare was a fact of life. Your goal was to protect your trade route and also to protect your source of water. And as time goes on, by the early 600s CE, towns begin to grow up on these trade routes. And of course, the town would grow up around an oasis, a source of water. Here we have an example of an oasis. And this source of water would be one of the only areas that you would find any vegetation in the Arabian Peninsula. Here we have an example of a trading caravan. We're using camels to help move our goods through the desert. Of course, camels are great for moving through the desert because they can store excess water in the hump on their back made up of fatty tissue. And of course, these are one hump camels. You would find two hump camels on the other side of the Himalayan mountains, closer to China. Mecca becomes an important town, and it's going to grow as a result of being on a trade route and will become a site for religious pilgrimages. A pilgrimage is a holy journey. Mecca was home to the Kaaba, an ancient religious holy shrine. We'll see some pictures of it coming up, but this Kaaba was said to have been built by Abraham. And we connect Abraham with Judaism. He's considered the father of Judaism. And in this Kaaba, there are over 360 idols during this time period that have been brought by the many polytheistic tribes from the region. So most of the people living in Arabia at this time were polytheistic, and any idols or statues that they made to their gods would be brought to the Kaaba in Mecca. And that's where people would go to worship these gods. Here is what the Kaaba looks like today. It is a box-like structure shrouded in black, and all those things around it are actually people. Okay, and we'll talk about why they travel to Mecca to see the Kaaba coming up in these notes. Around 570 CE, the Prophet Muhammad is born, and he is born to a powerful Meccan family. He begins working as a caravan trader and business manager as he gets older, and he will go on to marry Khadijah, an older businesswoman. At the age of 40, Muhammad receives a revelation from the angel Gabriel. A revelation is an eye-opening experience, and the angel Gabriel comes from the Judeo-Christian faith. The angel Gabriel told Muhammad that Muhammad was the messenger of Allah, which is Arabic for God, means the same thing. And from this revelation, Muhammad begins to teach that Allah was the one true God, and all the other polytheistic gods of the Bedouins should be abandoned. Muhammad's teachings, which we will learn about coming up, were called Islam, which means submission to the will of Allah. And the people who followed Muhammad were called Muslims, or those who have submitted. So Islam is the religion, and Muslims are the people who follow Islam, just like Christians are the people who follow Christianity. Jews are the people who follow Judaism. As Muhammad begins to teach, many people in Mecca were against him, and there were several reasons for this. They saw him as a revolutionary, someone who was trying to change society in Mecca. And those at the top of society, they did not want this change. They wanted to stay on top. They thought that the new faith of Islam would lead to the neglect of the traditional Arab gods. And they feared that Mecca and the Kaaba would lose their importance and that Mecca would lose its income. If people didn't need to visit the Kaaba to see all the idols of the polytheistic gods, they wouldn't come to Mecca to trade, and Mecca would lose money. So those were the reasons that the people of Mecca, the elites of society, were against Muhammad and his teachings. Muhammad and his followers left the city of Mecca after they were attacked in 622 CE. 622 is considered the first year of the Islamic calendar, which is a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar. And from Mecca, they're going to move to the city of Yathrib, about 200 miles north of Mecca. And this migration is called the Hijra. You're going to want to circle Hijra. That's the migration from Mecca to Yathrib, and Yathrib would be renamed Medina. When we see it on our homework or quizzes or tests, we will call Yathrib Medina. But just in case you saw it as Yathrib, it's the same town as Medina. While Muhammad is in Medina, he becomes a political, military, and religious leader, and he attracts many followers. And because this is a new religion, he has to fight against others with different beliefs. In this picture, we can see a somewhat depiction of Muhammad. And you'll notice that he has been whited out. It's blank. One thing that you will not see in Islam is a focus on depicting individuals in artwork, especially not prophets. And that's because they don't want the artwork to be worshipped. They would consider that to be idol worship, and instead you would pray directly to Allah or God. And we can see the fire around this silhouette. And that shows that it is a religious figure, but again, you're not going to see the figure or their face because they don't want that person to be worshipped, in this case, Muhammad. In 630 CE, Muhammad and 10,000 of his followers marched to the outskirts of Mecca. They're ready to go to war, and the city leaders of Mecca surrender to Muhammad. Muhammad and his followers enter the city in triumph. They go to the Kaaba and destroy the polytheistic idols that are in the Kaaba, and then declare it a Muslim holy shrine. Soon afterward, the people of Mecca, they will go on to convert to Islam. So on the right, we've got the Kaaba, the black box that we've seen earlier, and it is surrounded by people. And they would be going there during the holy month of Ramadan to make their pilgrimage. On the left, we see a depiction of what's inside, and you will not find those idols inside anymore. In fact, the only thing that's left inside is a meteorite, which is said to be from the time of Abraham. So as we said, most of the people of Mecca convert to Islam, and over time the new faith begins to spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula. We have cultural diffusion because Arabia was a significant trade route between the three continents. Muhammad will go on to die in 632 CE, and he left no political or religious successor, no one to follow him. And that's going to be the cause of some trouble that we will see next class. Now we're going to move on to the beliefs and practices of Islam. In Islam, there is one God, and that is Allah. Their holy book is the Quran, which is the sacred text revealed by Allah. According to Islam, prophets were sent by Allah and include Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. So they follow in the tradition of Judaism and Christianity to other monotheistic faiths. Muslims believe that Muhammad is the last of the prophets, and they also believe in a judgment day and afterlife. So they believe in heaven and hell. In Islam, there are 5 pillars, and these pillars are the duties for all Muslims. They are faith, prayer, almsgiving, fasting, and pilgrimage, and we'll talk about each of them. Every Muslim must make the statement of faith, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. We can see depictions of calligraphy, and instead of showing the human form as it is, they instead use calligraphy, the art of beautiful handwriting, to make the depictions. We have prayer. Muslims must pray 5 times a day facing Mecca. They do this in early and mid-morning, noon, late afternoon, and evening. And in many cities, you would have criers, people who cry out, shout out when it's time to pray. Muslims believe in almsgiving or charity, and up to 2.5% of your income would be given as alms for charitable work to help out the less fortunate, and that is, of course, for anyone who can afford it. Fasting is done during the holy month of Ramadan. Fasting means no food or drink, and Muslims practice this during the day during the month of Ramadan. Once the sun sets, they will be allowed to partake in food or drink, and it's to show that your spiritual needs are greater than your physical needs. Because the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar, the holy month of Ramadan actually changes year to year. When I coached basketball at Annandale, I had many players who practiced Islam, and we had to be very cognizant that during Ramadan while they were practicing, we could only push players so hard because they were trying to go through practice after going all day without eating or drinking water. And when the sun set, and we know what time the sun was going to set, they'd be allowed to take a break from practice to hydrate and eat. So it is a very tough thing to go through, and you're doing this for an entire month. We have the pilgrimage or Hajj. Don't get the Hajj confused with Hijrah. They both look similar but are quite different. The Hajj is to be performed by every Muslim once in their life if they are physically able to. And what you would do is you would go to Mecca during the holy month of Ramadan and visit the Kaaba. And when you completed the Hajj, in some Muslim countries, you would add Haji to your name to signify that you have gone on the Hajj. Here we can see Mecca during the holy month of Ramadan when people are on the Hajj to see the Kaaba. We can see the Kaaba in the distance. And we've got all the people surrounding this mosque as they try to make their way to see the Kaaba. And instead of walking in straight lines, they actually kind of circle in towards it. And then once they've seen it and gotten close to the Kaaba, they circle outwards. The Quran is the holy book of Islam. Sometimes you'll see it spelled a little bit differently. Sometimes it will be spelled Koran, but it's the same thing. The Quran is the literal, uncorrupted word of God, written in classical Arabic, and they said that it cannot be translated. If you are going to follow the Islamic faith, you need to learn how to read Arabic so you can understand the Quran. They would say that if it's translated into another language, some things are lost in translation. Think about it this way. The Inuits, or Eskimo, who live in northern Canada where it's very cold and snows all the time, they've got over 20 different words for snow. We really only use the words snow, sleet, and freezing rain. They've got words for first snow of the day, last snow of the season, and so forth. And we don't really use those words. They would say that Arabic is the same way. Some things just can't be translated into English or another language. The Quran is different from something like the Bible. The Bible was written by others, while the Quran is said to be the words of Allah sent through the angel Gabriel and revealed to Muhammad. And this all took place between 610 and 632 CE. Muslims believe that this is God's final revelation to mankind. During Muhammad's lifetime, Gabriel's messages were chanted by the Prophet and his followers. After the death of Muhammad, these messages were compiled into the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Muslims are expected to follow the Sunnah, Muhammad's example for proper living. Try to live like Muhammad. And if you take the Quran, the holy book, and the Sunnah, the example for living, you get Sharia. And Sharia is a system of law that governs moral conduct, family life, and business community and relations. So Sharia is the civil law of Islam. The mosque is the center of the Islamic community. The mosque is the place of worship for Muslims. While daily prayers can be performed anywhere, it's required to attend Friday prayers at the mosque. In most mosques, men and women are separated. And minarets are the tower-like structures used to call Muslims to prayer. We saw those added on to the Hagia Sophia after the Muslim Ottoman Turks had conquered Constantinople. Instead of destroying the Hagia Sophia, they instead turned it into a mosque and added those minarets, which we'll see some examples of coming up. So here is the Hagia Sophia. It began as a church but would eventually become a mosque once the Ottomans took over the city. We can see these four towers, which are the minarets, and a crier would go to the top to let people know when it's time to pray. Another important site for Muslims is the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. Jerusalem would go on to become a holy city for Jews, Christians, and now Muslims. The Dome of the Rock is said to be the place where Abraham was set to sacrifice his son, going back to Judaism. And this son was Isaac in the Jewish and Christian tradition. And the Islamic tradition, it's actually Ishmael he was set to sacrifice. So the Dome of the Rock is located on the site of the old Jewish temple that had been destroyed by the Romans. Of course, there is a rock slab there where Abraham was set to make the sacrifice. And in the Islamic tradition, this is the spot in which Muhammad ascended to heaven to learn the will of Allah. If you notice, the Dome of the Rock has architectural features that call back to the Mediterranean world. So ideas from the Greeks and Romans like the dome and the columns, which come from Greece. But as we'll come to find out, it also features arabesque, an artistic style used in the Islamic world. Here we have the Mosque of the Prophet in Medina. And again, we can notice the minarets. This is the Blue Mosque found in Istanbul, which is located very close to the Hagia Sophia. And because it was close to where the Greeks and the Romans once ruled, we notice that they use arches and domes in the architecture. Here we have the minaret, which you would climb up to cry out when it's time to pray. Also notice the artwork on the building. We call that arabesque. We'll learn more about that a little bit later. Here we have a crier atop the minaret to call out when it's time to pray. And people during this time don't have watches or cell phones to tell them what time it is. So it was all based on the location of the sun in the sky. In this picture, we have Muslims praying at a modern day mosque. Again, they would all be facing the location of Mecca, of the Kaaba. So we've been talking about connections that Islam has to Christianity and Judaism throughout these notes. Muslims believe in the same conception of God as that of Jews and Christians. And Muslims believe that this one God has had many prophets, including Jesus and Abraham. So again, following the Judeo-Christian tradition, they would say that over time, God has spoken to and through many prophets, including those prophets spoken of in the Bible and the Torah. Remember, the Bible is the holy book for Christians, and the Torah is the holy book for Jews. Muslims believe that God's final message was communicated to Muhammad, the revelation, and he was given a more perfect message than the prophets who preceded him. And this was the final message. Other facts about Islam: their place of worship, as we said, is the mosque. The holy day is Friday. For Jews, it is Saturday during the daytime, and Christians, Sunday. There is direct worship of God, so no clergy. Pork is forbidden and considered unclean, and there are Jews who also will not eat pork. Alcohol is not allowed. Women must cover up to show modesty. Men and women are segregated at the mosque as to not distract each other from prayer. Jerusalem, along with the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is considered a sacred site in Islam. And despite its beginnings in the Middle East, the largest Muslim populated country is actually Indonesia, a Pacific island. This map shows us the spread of Islam today. Again, we started out in Arabia, but we'll see Islam spread through North Africa, the rest of the Middle East and Central Asia, and then to the Pacific Islands. You'll also notice that the green are Sunni Muslims, areas of Sunni Muslims, while the red are Shia Muslims. We'll talk about that split next class. But for us, that's going to be it for notes today.